The Vanguard drifted through the vast expanse of space, its sleek hull reflecting the light of the distant Vega star. Inside the ship's command center, Captain Marcus Steele stood, arms crossed, staring at the tactical display. The screen showed the image of a massive asteroid, once a thriving mining colony, now ominously silent. Colony, which had housed approximately 250 people, consisting of the miners, their families, and other administrative staff, had gone dark weeks ago. The last communication had been garbled, filled with static and terror-stricken voices, mentioning an alien discovery deep within the asteroid. Then, silence. The Vega system was critical to Earth's expansion, rich in minerals and resources. Losing contact with the colony was a serious blow, and whatever had caused the disappearance of the miners needed to be understood and contained. This was no ordinary mission. It had the hallmarks of a suicide run, the kind the Rangers were known for. Steele turned to his team: Lieutenant Jake Hawkeye Carter, Sergeant Leo Bull Martinez, Corporal Alex Ace Griffin, Private Ethan Doc Hayes, and Lieutenant Samantha Viper Reynolds. They were the best of the best, each one a seasoned veteran of countless missions. Together, they had faced horrors that would break lesser men and women. But there was a weight to this mission that none of them would shake.
We're dropping in on the Vega colony. No atmosphere, no sign of life. Last transmission hinted at an alien lab deep within the asteroid. We're going in. We need to find out what happened, and we bring our people back, if there's anyone left to bring back. We are going to be in our biohazard armor for this one. I don't expect combat, but be ready if we have to get into a fight.
Steele said, his voice steady. The team nodded grimly as they prepared for the drop. The ironclad dropship waited in the hangar, engines idling as the Vanguard entered orbit. The ship's sleek, angular design was built for speed and protection, capable of withstanding the harshest environments and getting the Rangers in and out of hostile situations quickly. As the ironclad detached from the Vanguard, the Rangers strapped in for the descent. The dropship's engines roared to life, propelling them toward the asteroid below. Through the portholes, the rocky surface of the asteroid grew closer, a barren and hostile landscape dotted with the structures of the mining colony. The ironclad landed on a flat platform near the colony's main hangar. The Rangers disembarked, their exoskeletons gleaming in the harsh light of the distant star. The airless environment meant they had to rely on their suits' life support systems, their helmets sealed tight, filtering every breath they took. The colony itself was a mix of dug-in chambers and surface buildings, interconnected by pressurized walkways and tunnels. Despite its once bustling population, the silence now was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of their suits. The Rangers scanned the area, searching for any signs of life, found none. Steele's voice crackled over the comms.
Stay sharp. We've got no idea what we're dealing with.
The Rangers moved cautiously across the asteroid's surface, the shadows cast by the colony's structures playing tricks on their eyes. Occasionally, something flickered at the edge of their vision. Movements in the shadows, but when they turned to look, there was nothing. The only response to their presence was silence. They reached the massive hangar doors, sealed shut and covered in dust. Ace approached the control panel, working quickly to bypass the lock. Sparks flew as he pried open the casing and connected his tools. The doors groaned as they slowly parted, revealing a darkened interior.
Inside. Move.
Steele ordered. The Rangers entered the hangar, weapons raised and ready. The interior was as lifeless as the outside. The ships and vehicles that should have been in the hangar were missing, and the only signs of activity were scattered debris and broken equipment. The silence was suffocating, but the team pressed forward toward the control building, the colony's main hub. Inside the control building, the hallways bore the signs of a struggle. Chairs were overturned, tables smashed, and walls bore deep gouges. The sense of foreboding grew with every step, but there were still no signs of the miners.
No bodies.
Bull muttered, his voice low.
Where'd they all go?
Keep moving.
Steele commanded.
We'll find out soon enough.
The team split into two groups to cover more ground. Steele, Bull, and Doc took the west wing, while Hawkeye, Ace, and Viper moved east. Corridors twisted and turned, the Rangers' footsteps echoing through the empty halls. As they advanced, the walls grew darker, and strange, organic-looking marks appeared, as if something had clawed at the metal. Steele's team reached the control room, a large chamber filled with darkened consoles and blank screens. But there was no sign of life, no indication of what had happened. Doc checked the airlock leading to the surface, finding it sealed from the inside.
Looks like they locked themselves in.
Doc said, studying the controls.
But where did they go?
Before Steele could respond, Hawkeye's voice crackled over the comms, tense and urgent.
Captain, we've got movement. Something's...
The transmission cut out abruptly, replaced by static. Steele signaled his team to move, urgency in his voice.
We're regrouping with Hawkeye's team. Stay alert.
They navigated the twisting corridors, weapons ready. The unease in the air grew thicker with each step, silence more oppressive. When they reached the location where Hawkeye's team had last reported in, they found signs of a struggle. Blood splattered the walls and floor, and the body of a miner lay crumpled in a corner. Something was wrong. The miner's body was twisted, grotesque. Flesh peeled back from its fingers, and eyes bulging from its skull.
Steele behind you.
Bull shouted. Steele spun around just in time to see the miner. No, the thing that had once been a miner, lunge at him. Its eyes glowed with a feral rage. Its mouth twisted into a snarl. Steele fired his rifle, but the creature didn't stop. It took several shots to the chest before it staggered, and even then it kept coming, blood dripping from its wounds. Finally, Steele aimed at its head and unleashed a final burst of gunfire. The creature collapsed, its body twitching before falling still.
What the hell was that?
Doc gasped, staring at the fallen creature.
It's not human anymore.
Steele said grimly.
We need to find the others now.
They moved quickly, sweeping through the corridors until they found Hawkeye, Ace, and Viper. They were standing over the remains of another transformed miner. Viper's armor was splattered with blood, and her breathing was heavy.
They're not human anymore.
Viper said, her voice shaking.
They've changed into something else.
The team regrouped, but the feeling of dread only deepened. As they continued searching the colony, the signs of violence and madness increased. The walls were smeared with blood, and the equipment was shattered or overturned. Whatever had happened here, it had driven the miners to madness, or something worse. The Rangers soon found themselves in the heart of the colony, where the miners had supposedly discovered the alien chamber. As they approached, the lights flickered, casting long shadows that danced across the walls. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and the team moved cautiously, their weapons raised. Suddenly, something lunged at them from the darkness. Another one of those things. Its skin was pale and torn, its eyes wild with rage. The creature snarled and charged at them with unnatural speed. The Rangers fired, but the creature took several shots before it finally went down. More of the creatures emerged from the shadows, and the team found themselves in a brutal firefight. Creatures moved with terrifying speed and ferocity. They had lost all semblance of humanity, their bodies twisted and malformed. Their skin was pale and stretched tight over their bones, and their eyes were filled with a terrifying, mindless rage. The Rangers fired in controlled bursts, but the creatures kept coming, their bodies absorbing bullets and plasma rounds with unnatural resilience.
Stay together,
Steele ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos.
Don't let them surround us.
The Rangers formed a tight defensive line, firing at the advancing creatures. The hallway was filled with the sounds of gunfire, the sharp crack of rifles, and the hiss of plasma cannons echoing off the walls. The creatures didn't stop. They clawed and bit at the Rangers, their mouths dripping with blood and saliva. The Rangers fought back with everything they had, but it was a battle of attrition, and they were running out of time. Amidst the chaos, Ace was suddenly yanked into a side corridor by one of the creatures. Fired blindly, trying to free himself, the creature dragged him further away from the group. His helmet smashed against the wall, cracking the visor and knocking out his comms. Ace struggled to regain his bearings, cracked visor blurring his vision. He could see the outlines of more of the creatures in the dark corridor, their red eyes glowing with hunger. Alone and cut off from the rest of the team, he knew he had to survive long enough to reconnect with the others. Drawing his sidearm, he backed against the wall, breathing heavily as the first of the creatures charged at him. Ace squeezed the trigger, pistol barking as he unloaded round after round into the creature's chest. Staggered, didn't fall. The twisted miner was relentless, lunging at him with bloody claws outstretched. Ace barely dodged, the creature's claws scraping across his armor, leaving deep gouges. He fired again, aiming for its head this time. The bullet struck home and the creature collapsed, twitching on the ground before falling still. There wasn't time to catch his breath. More of the creatures were closing in on him, emerging from the shadows with animalistic snarls. Ace caught his breath, backing down the corridor as he reloaded his pistol. His visor was cracked, obscuring his vision with a spiderweb of fractures. Arms were dead, leaving him isolated from the rest of the team. He was on his own. The next creature charged at him with ravenous intensity, its eyes wild with fury. Ace aimed for its head, firing 2 quick shots. The first bullet struck its shoulder, but the second hit its mark, tearing through the creature's skull. Dropped to the ground, but there was no time to celebrate. 2 more were right behind it, clawing at the walls as they advanced. Ace knew he couldn't hold his ground here. He needed to get back to the others. He turned and sprinted down the corridor, the sounds of the creature's pursuit echoing in his ears. His breath came in ragged gasps as he ran, his heart pounding in his chest. The corridor twisted and turned, the shadows deepening with every step. He could feel the creatures closing in on him, their growls growing louder, but he didn't look back. Suddenly, he spotted a doorway up ahead, half open and leading into a larger chamber. Ace darted inside, slamming his back against the wall and raising his pistol, ready to fire. The first creature burst through the door, and Ace didn't hesitate. He fired 3 quick shots, all of them striking the creature in the head. It dropped to the floor, but more were coming. He couldn't stay here. He quickly scanned the chamber, spotting an air duct in the corner. It was narrow, but it might be his only way out. He holstered his pistol and sprinted toward the duct, wrenching the cover off with his bare hands. Behind him, the creatures poured into the chamber, their snarls filling the air. Ace didn't hesitate. He scrambled into the duct, pulling himself inside just as the first creature lunged at him. Its claws scraped against the metal, missing him by inches. The duct was cramped and dark, but Ace crawled as fast as he could, the sounds of the creatures echoing behind him. The metal groaned under his weight, and he could feel the vibrations of the creatures pounding against the duct, trying to tear their way inside. But he kept moving, desperate to put distance between himself and the monsters. After what felt like an eternity, he saw a faint light ahead. A way out. Ace kicked the duct cover open and crawled out into a storage room. Quickly scanned the area, but it was empty. For now, at least, he was safe. But he was still alone, and his comms were dead. He needed to find the others. He took a deep breath, steeling himself before opening the door and stepping back into the dark corridors. Meanwhile, Steele and the rest of the team were battling their own horde of zombie miners. The creatures came at them in waves, their twisted bodies absorbing bullet after bullet. The Rangers formed a tight defensive line, shoulder to shoulder, as they fired in controlled bursts, trying to hold back the tide. But the creatures kept coming, driven by a mindless fury that seemed endless.
They just won't stop.
Hawkeye shouted, reloading his rifle as another creature charged at him. He fired, the shot taking the creature's head clean off. 3 more were already closing in.
Keep firing.
Steele ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos.
We have to hold this line.
The hallway was filled with the deafening roar of gunfire, the flashes from their weapons illuminating the nightmarish scene. The creatures' eyes glowed with an unnatural red light. Their mouths twisted into snarls as they lunged at the Rangers. The ground was littered with bodies, both human and otherwise, but the creatures kept coming, their numbers seemingly endless. Viper grunted as she fired her plasma rifle at the horde, the rifle humming as it discharged round after round. She took down 2 more creatures, but they were getting closer, too close.
We can't hold them forever, Captain. We need a plan.
Deal knew she was right. They were running low on ammo, and the creatures showed no signs of stopping. If they didn't find a way out soon, they'd be overwhelmed. But retreating meant leaving Ace behind, and Steele wasn't about to abandon one of his own. Just as the situation seemed most dire, Bull's voice cut through the comms.
Captain, I think I found something.
Steele glanced over his shoulder. Bull was kneeling by a console, hastily typing commands into the interface.
What is it, Bull?
There's an access point to the old mining tunnels just ahead.
Bull replied.
We can use it to get out of here and regroup with Ace, but we'll have to move fast.
Steele didn't hesitate.
All right, fall back to Bull's position. We're moving out.
The Rangers began a fighting retreat, laying down covering fire as they slowly backed toward Bull's location. The creatures were relentless, but the Rangers' firepower was finally beginning to take its toll. The bodies of the fallen miners were piled high, and the remaining creatures hesitated, their ferocity faltering as the Rangers cut them down. Finally, they reached the access point Bull had found, a large metal hatch leading to the mining tunnels below. Steele punched the controls, and the hatch slid open with a hiss.
Go, go, go.
The Rangers didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled through the hatch, descending into the darkness below. Steele was the last one through, firing one final burst at the creatures before sealing the hatch behind him. The door slammed shut, cutting off the snarls of the creatures and leaving the Rangers in the quiet, oppressive darkness of the mining tunnels. They activated the lights on their helmets, casting long shadows as they descended further into the tunnels. The walls were rough and uneven, carved out of the asteroid's rocky interior. The air was stale, and the temperature dropped noticeably as they moved deeper underground.
Is everyone okay?
Steele asked, his voice echoing slightly in the narrow passage.
Still breathing, Captain.
Viper replied, checking her rifle.
Hawkeye, Bull, Doc?
Steele continued.
All good here, sir.
Hawkeye confirmed, while Bull and Doc gave affirmative nods. But the team was incomplete.
What about Ace?
Steele asked, his tone more urgent now. There was a moment of silence as everyone realized Ace's absence.
We lost contact with him when the creatures attacked.
Hawkeye said grimly.
His last known location was in the East Wing.
Steele's jaw tightened.
We're not leaving him behind. We'll find him, and then we'll finish this.
The Rangers pressed on, navigating through the maze of tunnels. The deeper they went, the more the atmosphere changed. The walls became smoother, almost as if they had been polished, and strange markings appeared, glowing faintly in the darkness. The sense of alien presence was unmistakable now, and it was clear that the miners had uncovered something far older and far more dangerous than they could have imagined. Finally, the team reached a large chamber deep within the asteroid. It was the alien lab the miners had discovered, but it was clear that something had gone terribly wrong. The room was in disarray, with overturned containers, shattered glass, and strange, organic-looking growth spreading across the walls. The air was thick with a faint, ominous, green glowing mist. Doc approached one of the overturned containers, carefully inspecting its contents.
This must be the source of the infection.
He said, his voice tight with concern.
Whatever was in these containers, it's what turned the miners into those creatures.
Steele's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the room.
We need to destroy this place. We can't let this infection spread any further.
But before they could set their plan in motion, the sound of footsteps echoed from the tunnel behind them. The Rangers tensed, raising their weapons, only to lower them again as a familiar figure emerged from the shadows. It was Ace, battered and bruised, but alive. His armor was scarred, and his visor was cracked, but his eyes were fierce with determination.
Captain?
He said, breathing heavily.
I found my way back.
Steele clapped Ace on the shoulder.
Good to have you back, Ace. Let's finish this.
The Rangers quickly planted charges throughout the lab, setting them to detonate on a timer. Once the charges were in place, they moved to the exit, ready to make their escape. But as they approached the tunnel leading out, the ground suddenly shook, and the walls trembled.
They're coming.
Bull shouted, as the tunnel ahead filled with the sound of snarls and screeches. The creatures were closing in, and there were more of them than ever.
Form a line.
Steele commanded.
We're making our stand here.
The Rangers took up defensive positions at the entrance to the tunnel, their weapons aimed at the oncoming horde. The creatures poured into the chamber, a writhing mass of claws, teeth, and fury. The Rangers opened fire, the roar of their weapons deafening in the confined space. It was a desperate battle, with the Rangers holding the line against overwhelming odds. Creatures charged in waves, their numbers seemingly endless. The Rangers fought with everything they had, but the horde kept coming, clawing and biting at them with relentless ferocity. The ground was littered with the bodies of the fallen creatures, and the air was thick with what could be described as green and red mist.
We can't hold them forever, Captain. We need a plan.
Viper shouted, her voice strained with effort.
Just a little longer.
Steele barked, his rifle blazing as he cut down another creature. The horde pressed in, forcing the Rangers back step by step. The situation grew more desperate by the second, but they held their ground, determined not to let the creatures reach the charges. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the creatures fell, its body riddled with bullets. The Rangers stood in the aftermath, breathing heavily, their armor stained with blood and green goo. The horde had been defeated, but the cost had been high. There would be no rescuing the miners and their families. That time had passed when the contagion escaped. Steele glanced at the timer on his HUD.
We need to move now.
The Rangers didn't waste any time. They sprinted down the tunnel, retracing their steps through the labyrinth of mining tunnels. The ground continued to tremble as the charges counted down, the rumble of impending destruction growing louder with each passing second. They burst out of the tunnels and into the open air just as the charges detonated. A massive explosion rocked the asteroid, sending a shockwave through the colony. The ground shook violently, and the alien lab was consumed in a fiery inferno, taking the infection and the creatures with it. The Rangers didn't stop until they reached the ironclad. They boarded the dropship and secured the hatch, the engines roaring to life as they lifted off from the asteroid's surface. Through the portholes, they watched as the colony was engulfed in flames, the fire consuming everything in its path. Everyone, get into the decontamination room. We can't risk any of this getting back onto the Vanguard. As the ironclad ascended into space, Steele leaned back in his seat, letting out a long breath.
Mission accomplished,
he said, his voice weary but resolute. The Rangers were battered and bruised, but they were alive. They had faced the darkness and emerged victorious, but they knew this was only the beginning. The discovery of the alien lab had raised more questions than answers, and the threat they had faced was unlike anything they had encountered before. But for now, they had survived, and they would continue to fight, no matter what horrors awaited them in the shadows of space. Once they docked with the Vanguard, Steele gave the order. The ship's crew launched a salvo of nuclear missiles and antimatter cannons at the asteroid. The Rangers watched from the command center as the asteroid erupted in a brilliant explosion, the colony and whatever horrors it contained reduced to dust. Teams stood in silence as the debris of the Vega colony drifted away, the memory of what they had seen and fought lingering in their minds. The Rangers knew they had survived. The questions of what they had encountered and what other threats lay hidden in the galaxy remained.
Thank you for listening. Be sure to subscribe and visit the channel for more interesting sci-fi stories and content.